I died on a trail I'd walked dozens of times before. That's how ordinary it all started. So normal it was almost boring. But in the space of a single breath, everything changed. If you had told me that a casual Saturday hike would be the last moment I'd ever see Earth the way I knew it, I wouldn't have believed you. I was just a 15-year-old girl. I loved TikTok, iced coffee, and putting off homework. I wasn't thinking about death. I wasn't scared of it. Honestly, I didn't even believe in anything spiritual. I thought I had years to figure all that stuff out. But on April 20th, all my assumptions shattered. It was the start of spring in Colorado, the kind of day where the sun tricks you into thinking it's warmer than it is. I had gone hiking with my best friend Ava. We'd done this trail so many times, we didn't even look at the map anymore. We brought snacks, took selfies, and joked about boys the entire way up. The air was thinner at elevation, but I didn't think much of it. I had asthma, yeah, but nothing serious. I'd used my inhaler before we started. We weren't running. We were just walking, laughing, being teenagers. About 2 miles up, I noticed it was harder to breathe. Not the usual kind of breathlessness you get when you're climbing. This was different. It felt like someone was slowly pressing a fist against the center of my chest. At first, I brushed it off. I didn't want to ruin our day or seem dramatic. But it got worse, fast. I remember saying, "Hold on, I need to sit for a sec." And then suddenly my ears were ringing. Ava's face blurred. The trees around us swayed like the whole world had gone underwater. And then, nothing. It wasn't like falling asleep. It was like dropping out of reality. No pain, no fear, just absence. Then came the floating. At first, I didn't understand what was happening. There was no gravity, no weight. I felt like I was hovering in the air, but I couldn't see my body. Then everything snapped into focus, like adjusting a lens. I was looking down at myself. My body, lifeless, collapsed on the trail, while Ava was bent over me, screaming my name, sobbing, fumbling with her phone. I wanted to tell her I was okay, that she didn't have to cry, but my mouth wouldn't move. I didn't have a mouth. I wasn't inside my body anymore. And yet, somehow, I was more me than I had ever been. There was no panic, just a deep, surreal peace. I could hear everything. Birds still chirping, the rustling of wind through pine trees, Ava's voice pleading through tears. I wasn't afraid. In fact, I felt more alive than I had on the trail, more present, more awake. And then came the pull. Gentle at first, like the current of a lazy river. It tugged at something inside me, not my skin or limbs, but my soul, and I let go. I stopped trying to stay with my body. I let myself be taken. As I drifted upward, the forest began to dissolve below me. Not vanish exactly, but fade. The trees became translucent, the mountains softened into mist. Everything earthly fell away, and I was wrapped in something impossible to describe. A tunnel, but not like a hallway. It was made of light, but also of memory and emotion. I wasn't moving through it. It was moving through me. The deeper I went, the more I remembered feelings I didn't even know I had forgotten. Things like perfect safety, deep belonging, and a love that didn't have to be earned. It was warm, not like fire, but like being held. Like every good moment in your life. Every hug, every laugh, every time someone looked at you like you mattered. All happening at once. Time didn't exist anymore. Or maybe it did, but it wasn't a straight line. I wasn't just going somewhere. I was returning. It felt like I'd always known this place, even if I didn't know I'd known it. I wasn't dreaming. I wasn't imagining. I was remembering. And the further I went, the more real it all became. There was no fear, no anxiety, no doubts. All the weight I'd carried, pressure to be perfect, fear of not fitting in, pain from things I hadn't even told anyone about, all of it just disappeared. I didn't have to prove anything. I didn't have to explain myself. I didn't have to be anyone but exactly who I was. And in that moment, I realized I wasn't dead. I was more alive than ever. But I wasn't finished yet. Something was coming. Someone was waiting. I don't know how long I drifted through that tunnel of light. It could have been seconds or centuries. Time had lost all meaning. What I do remember is the moment the tunnel opened. The light didn't just surround me. It became everything. It wasn't white or golden or any color you'd see in a paint set. It was alive, breathing, pulsing. And in the center of it stood someone. I didn't need an introduction. I didn't question it. The moment I saw him, I just knew. It was Jesus. Not because he looked like the stained glass version from churches or the paintings in my grandma's house. In fact, he didn't really look like any image I'd ever seen before. He was taller than I expected, but it wasn't his height that struck me. It was his presence. He radiated something beyond description. Not just love, not just power, something deeper. Like he was love itself, and wisdom, and truth. Everything about him drew me in, but also laid me bare. His eyes were unlike anything I've ever seen. Looking into them was like standing in front of the entire ocean and realizing it knows you, every part of you, every secret, every scar, and loves you anyway. When he said my name, Sierra, it wasn't just sound, it was a feeling. Like every syllable healed something broken inside me. I started crying, not out of fear or sadness, but out of relief. Like I'd been holding my breath my entire life and didn't know it until that moment. I wasn't afraid anymore. I didn't feel like a girl who had just died. I felt like I had finally come home after being lost for a very long time. I asked, "Am I dead?" My voice didn't come out of my mouth exactly. It was more like the question formed inside both of us at the same time. He didn't say yes or no. Instead, he said, "Your body is between worlds, but there is something important I want to show you." And when he reached out his hand, I didn't hesitate. The moment I took it, I felt something rush through me, a wave of something purer than anything I've ever known. A kind of love so strong it almost hurt. Not the love you get for doing something right. Not the love you beg for or hope someone gives you. This was love that existed just because I existed. Suddenly, I was no longer standing in front of him. I was watching. My life unfolded around me like a movie, but also like I was inside it. I could feel every emotion, every moment, as if it were happening again. Not just the big stuff, birthdays, volleyball games, school dances, but the little things, the things I'd forgotten. Like the time I helped a lost kindergartner find her classroom, or when I gave my gloves to a homeless man one winter morning, or the times I sat with my little brother playing Minecraft even though I didn't like it, just because he asked me to. And then there were moments I wished I could forget, times I yelled at my mom, laughed at someone behind their back, told half-truths to avoid getting caught. Things I thought didn't matter, but they did. What shocked me most was that Jesus didn't shame me for any of it. He didn't flinch at the worst parts of me. He watched them with me. And through it all, he loved me. Completely. Unwaveringly. His love didn't shrink when I failed, and it didn't grow when I did something good. It just was. Steady. Infinite. I realized that all my life, I had been measuring my worth by what I did. Grades, likes, how many friends I had. But he didn't see any of that. He saw me, the soul underneath all of it. As I watched my life, I started to see connections I'd never noticed before. A kind word I'd said in passing turned out to be the reason someone didn't give up that day. A small act of kindness I barely remembered had rippled out in ways I could never have imagined. And the same was true of my mistakes. I saw how words I spoke in anger left wounds, how ignoring someone's pain closed off a chance to help. I couldn't lie to myself anymore. Everything I did mattered, but still. He never stopped loving me. Then he said, "There is more I want you to understand. What you've seen so far is only the beginning." And I felt the ground shift again. We were standing, not on the tunnel path or the glowing platform, but on something that looked like a misty cloud. soft but firm underfoot. He raised his hand, and below us appeared a living map of Earth. I could see oceans, cities, people. Everything was in motion, like we were watching life in real time. And he looked at me and said something I'll never forget. I'm going to show you 3 things that will happen before the end of this decade. Not to scare you, but to prepare you, and to prepare others through you. His tone wasn't heavy or dramatic. It was gentle, loving, but serious. And I knew, whatever I was about to see would change everything. At first, I didn't understand what I was seeing. The Earth spread out beneath us, not like a globe in a classroom, but alive, moving, breathing, shimmering with activity. It was like watching humanity from above, but also somehow within it. I could feel what was happening, not just see it. Jesus raised his hand and gently motioned for me to look closer. In a calm but deeply focused voice, he said, "This is the first." The view zoomed in, and suddenly I was over the ocean. The skies were darkening. Winds screamed across the water, churning the surface into massive waves. It didn't feel like watching a storm on TV. I could feel the panic, the confusion, the heartbreak of those caught in it. Coastal cities began disappearing under rising waters. Familiar places, New Orleans, Miami, parts of Tokyo, entire island nations, vanished beneath the flood. People were scrambling, some crying, some frozen in shock, others doing anything they could to get their families to safety. But even in the middle of that chaos, something else emerged. I saw strangers pulling strangers into boats, people handing over dry clothes, food, shelter to those who had nothing. A church with broken windows became a refuge. A man who had once turned away the poor was now cooking soup on a gas stove for 20 people he'd never met. Countries that had once argued over borders were now sending aid without question. Jesus turned to me and said, "This is not punishment. It's consequence." The earth has been groaning for years, and now it responds. But even in the groaning, watch how love rises. I didn't understand how something so terrible could birth something so beautiful. And then he added, "When what is comfortable is shaken, what is eternal is revealed. Fear will come, but so will compassion, and in that compassion, many will begin to remember me." As the storm waters surged, the screen of earth faded into mist. My heart was still pounding from the intensity of what I'd just witnessed. Before I could even ask what came next, he spoke again. "Now I will show you the second." A stillness came, followed by a wave of eerie silence. The earth returned before us, but this time the lights began going out. Entire cities blinked into darkness. New York, Los Angeles, Paris, Seoul, Cape Town. It was like someone had flipped the switch on modern civilization. No phones, no power, no connection. The usual hum of technology, gone. At first I saw panic, people frantically searching for answers, trying to connect, stores emptying, families sitting in the dark, unsure of what to do next. But that wasn't the whole picture. Slowly, something remarkable unfolded. With no screens to hide behind, people began noticing each other again. Neighbors who had lived side by side for years but had never spoken were now sitting on porches together, candles glowing between them. Music played, not from speakers but from guitars, violins, and voices. Children played games with sticks and chalk in driveways, not apps. Families cooked together. Friends talked for hours under the stars. Humanity began to remember itself. Jesus spoke again, and his words settled deep into my spirit. "What man built in pride will falter for a time, not as wrath, but as mercy. The systems you've depended on were never meant to replace community or faith or presence. In the silence, people will hear what the noise drowned out, and in that hearing, some will find me for the first time." I looked down again and saw people gathering, not for entertainment or distraction, but for connection. I saw families praying, reading old books by flashlight, playing board games. Teenagers were no longer glued to screens. They were learning how to fix things, grow things, care for others. And something else began to spread. Hope. Not the kind you find in a headline, but the kind that comes from knowing you're not alone. The kind that comes from helping someone else and realizing your hands were made to build, not just scroll. The vision didn't ignore the hardship. There were struggles. Hospitals operating on backup generators, food being rationed, people feeling the weight of discomfort. But through it all, something sacred was being born. A reawakening, a stripping away of what didn't matter, and a return to what always had. And I realized Jesus wasn't showing me an ending. He was showing me a door, a moment where the world would be given a choice, panic or peace, fear or faith, isolation or community. He looked at me then, eyes full of both sorrow and hope, and said, "When the lights go out, my light will remain." And for many, that will be the beginning of true vision. I didn't speak. I couldn't. I just watched in awe as darkness taught people to love again. The light of the second vision faded, and I felt a heaviness settle in the space around me. Not from fear, but from something deeper. A kind of grief mixed with urgency. Jesus didn't have to say a word. I could feel it in the silence before he spoke again. "This is the third," he said softly, and the world beneath us began to shift again. The image was harder to look at this time. It wasn't just physical destruction like storms or blackouts. This was something invisible, but it was everywhere. I saw people moving with caution, hesitant to touch, to embrace, to gather. Their faces were covered not just with masks, but with fear. A sickness had come, something new, something the world hadn't seen before. But the illness itself wasn't what struck me the most. It was what it revealed. People weren't just afraid of getting sick, they were afraid of each other. Suspicion spread faster than the disease. Families turned on each other over beliefs. Communities fractured. Friendships ended over differing opinions. I saw people shut their doors, not just to keep out illness, but to keep out connection. The fear wasn't only physical, it was spiritual, it was emotional. It built walls inside the heart. I could feel how this new wave of fear wasn't like the pandemic we had known before. It was colder, sharper, more deeply rooted in division than in danger. And it was being fed. That's what stunned me most. It wasn't natural. There were forces, dark and cunning, amplifying the fear, spreading misinformation, fueling anger, whispering lies into hearts that were already tired. I watched as governments struggled to respond, not knowing who to trust. I saw people who claimed to care using the moment to gain power. I saw spiritual leaders torn between truth and influence. But amid the division, a different kind of light began to push through. It wasn't loud or flashy. It was subtle. People choosing love, even when it was hard. Nurses staying by the bedsides of strangers. Teachers helping kids through distance learning with patience and compassion. Teenagers making meals for elderly neighbors who were too scared to leave home. I saw families, broken by arguments, begin to forgive. I saw people gather in the open, parks, rooftops, backyards, and pray. Not in polished sermons, but in raw, trembling voices. Some of them had never prayed before, but something inside them knew. We cannot face this alone. Jesus turned to me again, and his face was full of such sorrow, but also a fierce hope. The sickness will challenge the body, but fear will challenge the soul, he said. Those who let fear rule them will lose more than health. They will lose their connection to each other. But those who resist the fear, who choose love in its place, they will become light in the darkness. I looked back down and saw that happening. People creating safe spaces that still welcomed. Medical workers exhausted but refusing to stop. Volunteers delivering supplies. Children drawing chalk hearts on sidewalks. I saw the fear, yes, but I also saw the resistance. Not with weapons, but with courage, with community, with quiet faith that refused to die. The scene began to dim, and I felt Jesus place his hand on my shoulder. The visions were over, but the message wasn't. What you've seen, he said, are not the end of days. They are crossroads, moments of decision. Each one will test hearts, not just systems, not just science, but the soul of humanity. His eyes searched mine. These trials are not my punishment. They are the result of choices, of forgetting what matters, of turning away from love. But even now, I will use them to bring people home, to awaken what has been sleeping, to call my children back. Before I could ask what anyone was supposed to do, he led me into another place. At first, it looked like nothing I could recognize, just light, soft, and golden, filling everything. But then I saw it. Threads. Endless glowing threads stretched in every direction, weaving a tapestry so vast I couldn't see the edges. They pulsed with a kind of rhythm, like they were alive. Each one shimmered with its own unique light. These are prayers, he told me. Every single thread, every whisper, every cry, every hope ever lifted toward heaven. He walked forward and touched one. The moment his fingers brushed it, the thread lit up brilliantly. And that light raced outward, touching dozens, then hundreds of others. It was like a ripple in still water, spreading in every direction. This one, he said, was yours. Do you remember when you prayed for your friend Liam? When you didn't know what to say, but you asked for help? I nodded slowly. Nothing happened, I whispered. At least not that I saw. Jesus smiled, tender and knowing. But it did. That prayer strengthened him when he was about to give up. It brought peace to his mind when no one else knew how to help. It gave his mother the instinct to check on him at just the right moment. And it gave you patience to love him through silence. I couldn't speak. Tears blurred my vision. He touched another thread. It lit up and sent sparks outward. This one came from a woman in Brazil who prayed for rain. It brought not only water to her village, but inspired a man watching the clouds to believe again. Another from a boy in Ukraine, asking for his father to come home. That prayer didn't stop the war, but it stirred a stranger's heart to shelter his family. One prayer is not small, he said. It is eternal. It is power the world has forgotten. I stood there, stunned by the beauty of it all. The reality that every whispered word to heaven mattered, that our prayers weren't lost in silence. They were woven into something cosmic, something alive. And then he said, in the times that are coming, prayer will not be an option. It will be the breath of the soul. It will be how you hold each other when you cannot touch, how you build bridges when the world demands walls. It will be the resistance to despair, and the doorway to hope. I looked around one last time at the glowing threads, each one humming with purpose, with unseen miracles waiting to unfold. And then I understood. These weren't just warnings. They were invitations. Invitations to respond, to rise, to pray, to love, to prepare. Not in fear, but in faith. I didn't want to leave. That's the part people don't understand until they've been there. It wasn't about running from pain or escaping Earth. It was that everything I ever longed for without knowing it was right there. I was surrounded by a peace so complete, so whole, that even the best moments of my life on Earth felt like shadows by comparison. I wasn't just loved, I was love. And standing in the presence of Jesus, with the golden threads of prayer still pulsing around us, I felt like every broken part of me had been put back together in a way I hadn't even known was possible. So when he turned to me and said, "It's time," my heart broke in a way I didn't know a soul could break. I whispered, "Can I stay?" And it came out smaller than I meant it to, like a child begging not to go back to the cold. His eyes were filled with more understanding than I could bear. "I know," he said gently. "I know you don't want to return, but there's more for you to do. Your time isn't finished. You have been shown these things for a reason, not to carry them alone, but to share them." I tried to argue, not out loud, just in the aching of my heart. I didn't feel strong enough. I didn't want to carry the weight of what I'd seen, the rising waters, the fear, the silence, the division. But he knew. He placed his hands on both of my shoulders, looked directly into my soul, and said, "You won't be alone. I will be with you, always. Even when you can't feel me like this, a part of you will always remember the way home." That's when he embraced me. Not like a normal hug. It was everything. Every memory of being safe, every warm touch, every kind word, every moment I ever felt seen or held by anyone in my life, all wrapped into one, and multiplied by eternity. I didn't want to let go. The very core of my being clung to that embrace. But then, like a wave pulling back into the ocean, I felt myself being drawn away. There was a sound, distant but growing louder. A rush of wind, like time folding in on itself. I was falling. Not downward, but backward. Like being pulled out of eternity into a timeline I barely remembered. I opened my eyes to chaos, pain. A mask was over my face. Lights flashed. Voices shouted around me. My chest ached so badly it felt like something had been broken open with fire. I heard someone cry out, "She's back! She's breathing." I couldn't speak, couldn't even move. But somewhere, under the pain, I remembered. I remembered him, the tunnel, the light, the visions, and the mission. I was back, but I would never be the same. They told me later I had no heartbeat for nearly 4 minutes. My heart had stopped. An undiagnosed condition no one saw coming. Ava, my best friend, had kept me alive long enough for help to arrive. They said it was a miracle I didn't suffer brain damage, that I was conscious at all. But I knew better. It wasn't just a miracle. It was purpose. I spent 3 days in the hospital. I couldn't eat much. I barely slept. But I was filled with something no medicine could provide. A sense of clarity, of weight, of calling. My mom stayed with me, barely letting go of my hand. When she stepped out one morning, I told my dad everything, every detail. I expected him to doubt me, or smile and chalk it up to a hallucination. Instead, he looked shaken. After a long pause, he said, "When I was in college, I was in a car crash. I never told anyone this, but something happened to me too. Not exactly like yours, but I saw something. And I've never forgotten it." His voice cracked. And that's when I realized, so many people have touched the edge of eternity. They just never talk about it. Coming home felt strange. Everything was the same, but I wasn't. The trees outside my window looked more vibrant. The sun felt warmer on my skin. Even my annoying little brother's laugh somehow filled me with joy. But I also saw the brokenness more clearly. I noticed pain on people's faces I used to ignore. The cashier with trembling hands. The kid sitting alone at lunch, pretending not to care. The elderly man walking past our house who looked like he carried a lifetime of sorrow in his shoulders. It was like my heart had been rewired to notice things no one talks about. And the dreams started soon after. Not normal dreams, vivid, real. In them, Jesus kept showing me things, reminding me of what I saw, explaining pieces I hadn't yet understood. Some of the dreams didn't make sense, but I kept a journal. I knew they meant something. I also knew I couldn't keep this to myself. I started small. I invited Ava and 2 other friends over to talk. We sat in the basement and lit a few candles. I shared my story piece by piece. They cried, not because they were scared, but because something inside them recognized the truth of it, and they weren't the only ones. One of our neighbors, an older woman who had lost her husband last year, started coming too. Then a classmate whose mom had cancer. We didn't do anything formal. No fancy lessons or sermons. We just talked. We listened. We prayed. And that little group of 4 turned into 10, then 15. People hungry not for answers, but for meaning, for connection, for hope. I don't share everything with everyone. Some people aren't ready. Some laugh or think it's just a weird story. That's okay. I'm not here to convince anyone. Jesus didn't show me those visions to scare people or make me famous. He showed me because hearts are going to need strength in the years ahead. Not just strength to survive, but strength to love. Strength to stand firm when everything else is shaking. Strength to resist fear and choose compassion. To prepare not just emergency kits and flashlights, but to prepare our hearts. If you're hearing this and something inside you stirs, I want you to know, it's not too late. The events I saw aren't the end of the world. They're wake-up calls, not from wrath, but from mercy. To remind us what we've forgotten. That love is stronger than fear. That prayer is real. That kindness matters more than image. And that in the darkest moments, light shines the brightest. The future might look uncertain, but I know this with all my heart. The love I felt in that place is real. It's not gone. It's with us now, holding us, waiting for us to return. And one day, when it's truly time, we'll all go home to it. Until then, I'll keep sharing, keep praying, keep preparing, not with fear, but with hope. Because I know what waits on the other side, and it's more beautiful than anything we've ever imagined.